What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel, where today we have another fantasy football video. Now, we have the guys that you must avoid when going into these fantasy football drafts this upcoming season. These are guys that are overvalued, and they are going way too high right now. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. Up first, we have a guy that's benefited a lot of us over the fantasy years, over the last couple of years, myself included, and that's Stefon Diggs, who is now going over to the Houston Texans. Now, let me explain why. The Texans have added a couple of interesting pieces. They've added an additional tight end in Cade Stover and a capable running back in Joe Mixon. They've already been 17th in pass rate in 2023. I don't necessarily see them improving that number into a more passing offense with the addition of Joe Mixon and having that higher pass rate. And, the Texans, they just lost 3 O-linemen. They drafted 2 rookies, but how much of an immediate impact are those rookies going to make with them? Along with that, he's got some viable targets next to him in Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Collins, number 1 in NFL on targets of 15 yards or more. He was 2nd in wide receiver efficiency, 6th in yards after the catch, and 7th in fantasy points per game. And on the other side, we have Tank Dell, who averaged 12th in average target distance, 14th in yards per route run, and CJ Stroud is a big fan of passing to Tank Dell. Then you have guys like Dalton Schultz and now Cade Stover that are also going to be added into the lineup, and it just makes for a really mixed offense that you don't really know who is going to succeed on this. You can see here on Sleeper, Diggs is going about 27.9 average draft position, and he's ahead of Nico Collins on this list. He's also ahead of guys like Mike Evans, DJ Moore, and Michael Pittman, and that just doesn't make any sense to me because the Texans have all of these mouths to feed. You don't really know who's going to establish themselves as the number 1 alpha in this offense, and I firmly believe, you have DJ Moore, Michael Pittman, Mike Evans. Those are number 1 guys in their offense, and I don't really see any reason to be ahead of them. On the flip side, on Underdog, something that a lot of people use, he's still ahead of Michael Pittman. He is a little bit lower, wide receiver 22 versus like the wide receiver 14, 15 on Sleeper. But he's also ahead of George Pickens and Amari Cooper and Christian Kirk on both of these websites. And I firmly believe that those are guys that could be a lot better than what Diggs could be this season. I think that they have a lot more volume coming their way, and I just don't see any reason to draft Diggs over these guys. Now, up next, we have a player that people are definitely going to look at me like I'm crazy, but it's CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud, don't get me wrong, is an absolutely phenomenal talent. He has the makings of a great quarterback in the league, but he's going way too high in my opinion, and let me tell you why. So first off, again, as I had mentioned previously in the Stefon Diggs, they lost 3 O-linemen. You see here, they lost George Font, they lost Michael Dietler, and they lost Josh Jones, and they only replaced it with Blake Fisher and Ladarius Henderson. So these are 2 rookies, one of them being a late rookie that aren't going to immediately impact the team, one would think. And this was already a questionable offensive line for Houston, and this just makes matters worse. On top of that, when you look at the average draft picks for CJ Stroud, on Underdog, you can see there he's going about 20 ahead of Kyler Murray, 25 ahead of Joe Burrow, and 30 ahead of Dak Prescott. Now, these are ridiculously crazy numbers. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's even worse on Sleeper. He's going 18 spots ahead of Anthony Richardson, 20 spots ahead of Joe Burrow, 30 ahead of Dak Prescott, and 40 picks ahead of Kyler. As much as this is a great offense and there are a lot of weapons that can help strive CJ Stroud forward when it comes to his ranking this year, the limitations on his rushing upside are really what makes the difference. Now, don't get me wrong, he rushes, perfectly fine. He has athletic ability, but he only averaged 11 yards rushing per game last year. And with guys like Kyler, with guys like Anthony Richardson going behind him, he's losing that rushing upside. This was the quarterback 11 last year, and that was with the limitation of turnovers that CJ Stroud had, the performances that he was putting on. He was still only the quarterback 11, and granted, I'm not speaking ill of him. That was his rookie campaign, and he can only get better with additions like Stefon Diggs and Joe Mixon. However, when guys like this are going behind him and they have that rushing upside, you have to think that CJ Stroud is going way too far ahead. He should not be going as, the QB5, QB6. I'm thinking probably more the QB 8, 9, 10 range because of that. These are all guys that should be going way ahead of him, and for that reason, I think CJ Stroud needs to be avoided right now. Now, up next is going to be a very controversial one for a lot of people, and that's going to be Malik Nabers. Now, I know what you're thinking, and I agree with you. Malik Nabers is an incredible athlete, but the system that he's in right now and the situation he has on the New York Giants leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to fantasy relevance, and I'll explain what I mean. So, last year, Tyrod Taylor, Tommy DeVito, Daniel Jones made up the quarterback room, and they threw for a total of 3,350 yards. Now, no receiver on this team had over 1,000 yards. In fact, the Giants have not had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2019 when Eli Manning was the quarterback, and he threw it to Odell. The Giants haven't had a net passing yards per game over 200 since 2019, and Daniel Jones is coming off an ACL injury. So, to put this into perspective, when it comes to the Giants passing game over the last couple of years, they were 31st in 2023, 26th in 2022, 31st in 2021, and 29th in 2020 since Daniel Jones has become the quarterback. This leaves a lot of question marks when it comes to Nabers. Well, not only Nabers, but everybody else on that offense. I understand somebody has to produce, but they haven't produced any 1,000-yard receivers. So it leads me to be a little skeptical on Nabers. Now, when you look at where he's going as the wide receiver 19 on Underdog. This is ahead of guys like DK Metcalf and DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, Michael Pittman. This makes no sense to me. He should not be going ahead of guys like this, even though he is very talented. He's a rookie. He has a lot to be proven. These are already established number one guys, and there's no reason for him to go ahead of them. Now, on Sleeper, he's drafted, average 35th overall, and he's still going ahead of guys like Jalen Waddle, guys like DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith. Like, these are guys that should produce more than Malik Nabers, and we're still choosing Nabers over them. I don't see any reason to be so high on Nabers this upcoming season because of all of these factors. I think that he's going to have to prove it to me before I draft him, and I would just avoid him altogether along with everybody on that Giants offense. Now, up next, we have Davante Adams, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Davante Adams. I'm a Fresno State fan through and through. You will not find a bigger lover of Davante Adams and Derek Carr than me. That being said, Davante Adams, he needs to be avoided this year, and there are a couple of reasons why. He's had his lowest passer rating when targeted and yards after catch per reception since 2017. There's a lot of question marks at quarterback with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. You just don't really know how they're going to perform. I know we saw a lot of decent things from Gardner Minshew, but Aiden O'Connell, they said that it was his job to lose from the very start. So I didn't like the production, really. Pierce has also expressed that he wants to run the ball at a high rate. So that might provide less opportunities for Davante Adams. That being said, he did have 175 targets last year, but only 103 catches. He only scored 12.9 fantasy points per game last year, and these numbers are a little skewed. 23% of this target share was over 2 games when he saw 20 targets each game. And 31% of his fantasy points were in those 2 games. Now, if I'm betting on, somebody who's going to score a third of their points over 2 games, I'm going to avoid them, and I'm going to look for a more consistent option. I just don't like how the Raiders' offense is working right now. I don't like the pieces. I don't like how they look to be this upcoming season. I don't think they're going to be that great. And I think there are a lot of other viable options. On Underdog, Nico Collins is going after him, Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, Debo. I think that these are all, more viable options. I think Adams could, don't get me wrong, he's a great player. He's absolutely a monster. But the consistency is kind of where I'm a little skeptical. And then, of course, in sleeper, I would much rather have Drake London. Part of me really would like Chris Olave more. Again, Nico Collins, Mike Evans. Those are guys that I would like more than Davante Adams. So I would stay away from him altogether. And last but not least, we have the most controversial opinion on this list, and that's Sam LaPorta. And this isn't because I don't believe that he's going to have a great season. This is more of a personal preference. I'm not going to bring you with a bunch of stats like I have with the other guys, but I'm going to explain why I'm not going to draft Sam LaPorta. And that's because I believe that there are tons of viable options later on. So you can see here on Underdog, he's drafted average 35th. He goes about 4 picks before Kelsey. He has Mark Andrews. That's 15 picks before Mark Andrews. Almost 20 picks before Dalton Kincaid. I believe Kyle Pitts is set up to have a really great season. Almost 30 picks before him. Evan Ingram is maybe the number 2 target on Jacksonville's offense, and he's 40 picks ahead of him. When you look at sleeper, Sam LaPorta has 50 picks before Evan Ingram. He has 36 picks before Kyle Pitts, almost 30 picks before Dalton Kincaid, 26 before Mark Andrews. So when it comes down to it, I feel like I can reach a little bit on, some of these wide receivers, these running backs, if they're in the position to do so. I think that if he falls a little bit and Sam LaPorta is still sitting there, at the end of the second round, God forbid, not end of second round, start of maybe fourth round, end of third round, not going to happen. But that's probably when I would grab him. Otherwise, I'm not going to really look at Sam LaPorta. I feel like I can get decent value in other positions instead, and I could still draft a good tight end because of certain guys that are on this list where it's not going to make much of a difference. And that's going to be it for me. These are, 5 of the players that I'm going to avoid at their average drafted position currently. Things are going to change, and, situations could get better, could get worse. But for now, these are the 5 guys that I'm primarily looking to avoid. If you guys like this video, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.